Don't worry, Archie. They can't hurt us anymore. Stop, Archie, sit! It seems I'm finished. But let me start at the beginning. My name is Sarah, and until I was 15, I had never gone to school. It might be hard to believe, I know, but I have a pretty unique family. My parents were zoologists, and they studied wild animals in Antarctica. So for as long as I could remember, I had always been surrounded by endless snow. Lemmings and seals had become my friends, and my mother and father were my teachers who taught me in their free time. It may seem strange to some, but I'd gotten used to it over the years, so I couldn't have even imagined how my life would change in just a couple of months while walking along the snow-covered beach. It turned out that my parents had been offered new, better-paying jobs, and we were going to move to a big city. Oh, I could finally go to a normal school, just like all the other kids. Of course, I was terribly excited. Sitting on the plane, I dreamed about finding a company to hang out with. A best friend, maybe even a boyfriend. But my hopes? Let's just say they weren't fulfilled. I knew something was wrong as soon as I walked into the school. Other children were looking at me sideways, some were even pointing fingers. I heard jeers from all sides. They called me a redhead, said I was too tall, and the most unpleasant thing was that someone had found out I had never studied at a school before. So they started calling me an illiterate on top of everything else. Day after day went like that. I was alone during the lunch breaks. In the classroom, no one would sit next to me. It was almost impossible to find a partner for any scientific projects. I came home every day in tears and couldn't understand why everyone hated me so much. The strangest thing was that I wasn't the only black sheep in school. There was a blind boy in the parallel class who always walked in the hallways with a cane. However, everyone treated him well. I even saw him hanging out with the popular guys. Why didn't anyone want me around? It couldn't go on like that any longer. I thought I was going crazy with loneliness. So I decided to take my mind off things and signed up to volunteer at a local dog shelter. The animals, waiting for new owners, needed love and care after all. After that, I hurried to my favorite dogs every day after classes. I cleaned their cages, filled their bowls with food, walked, groomed, helped to wash them. Their loyal eyes and cold, wet noses helped calm me down. More than that, I could talk to them. And I'd really been missing that lately. I treated all of them the same, but everything changed literally in one day. 2 incredibly beautiful Dobermans were brought to the shelter, except they were the meanest dogs I'd ever seen. Argo and Archie, as we called them, were constantly growling, barking, and attacking anyone who came up to their cage. The other employees of the shelter were afraid to even get close to them. Well, and I decided to make friends with them at all costs. That's why I started spending more time with them. By that time, things at school were already pretty horrible. So I would stay at the shelter until late at night, sitting next to Argo in Archie's cage, talking to them, even reading them books out loud. As weeks passed, the dogs gradually got used to me. At first, they stopped growling when I came closer. Then they started to wag their tails in greeting. Eventually, I became the only person allowed to enter Argo and Archie's cage. The dogs kept trying to attack everyone else, but they were happy to walk and play with me. I didn't feel so alone anymore. Now I felt like I had 2 best, most loyal friends. That's when I came to the shelter one day and found their cage empty. I felt like the most miserable person on the planet. I rushed to look for the dogs all over the building, asked the other employees of the shelter, but they all only stayed mysteriously silent in response to my questions. I didn't know what to think. Had they been taken home by new owners? I wasn't in the mood to take care of any other animals, so I decided to go straight home. I had already reached the bus stop when suddenly, I don't know why, but I decided to turn around and look at the shelter building. And you wouldn't believe what I saw there. Archie was looking at me from the window of one of the medical offices. There was so much sadness in his eyes that I realized what was going on at once. I ran back to the shelter faster than I'd run in my entire life. There was only one thought running through my head: if only I could make it in time. I burst into the medical office not a moment too soon. A veterinarian was leaning over one of the dogs with a syringe. It turned out that the owners of the shelter had decided to euthanize the Dobermans, having decided that such vicious dogs wouldn't be able to find new owners. They decided not to tell me anything so as not to upset me again. I'd never discussed the possibility of having a dog with my parents, but at that moment I had no choice. I simply couldn't let my beloved dogs die. so I decided to bring them home. I found a moment when my parents were at work and brought Argo and Archie to my room. I worried that my mom and dad wouldn't let me keep the dogs, so I decided to hide them for a while. To be honest, it was harder than I thought. When the dogs barked, I would lie and say that it was a notification on my phone. I would sneakily bring leftovers into my room to feed the Dobermans, which made my parents look at me strangely. I had to walk Argo and Archie at night, so I looked like a pale, sleep-deprived zombie in the morning. But you know what? It was worth it. I thought my life was starting to get better, but I was in for another shock. I came home from school early one day, went into my room, and didn't find Argo and Archie there. You can't even imagine how worried I was. I was sure my parents had found the dogs and taken them to the shelter. They couldn't do that. The time was crawling by when suddenly, the front door opened and I saw my mom and dad come in. They had Argo and Archie on leashes, and the dogs looked absolutely calm. It turned out that my parents had long ago discovered my deception. They had just been waiting for me to tell them everything, and in the meantime had made friends with the dogs and even managed to get attached to them. The experience of working with wild animals had helped them. I finally felt like things were looking up. Going to school was still awful, but Archie and Argo were waiting for me at home, and we were never bored. Of course, the dogs missed me terribly while I was away at school, so one day, I decided to take them with me. Oh, if only I'd known what it would lead to. I put my dogs on short leashes, but it was still incredibly difficult to handle them at school. Every time one of my classmates tried to shout something insulting in my direction, the Dobermans rushed in their direction. They barked and growled and looked so menacing that after the first lesson, everyone started avoiding me. And you know, I really love that. As soon as I walked into the hallway, people immediately parted to let me through. No one dared to say a word in my direction, so it was the quietest day I had ever spent at school. The next day, I took the dogs with me once again. Eventually, they became my constant companions. I'd never felt so safe and secure before. I walked through the hallways with my head held high because absolutely everyone at school was afraid of me. However, my happiness didn't last long. I used to feel lonely because I had been bullied. Now I was alone because I was feared. At some point, I realized that I couldn't take it anymore. I needed friends so badly, even Archie and Argo couldn't cheer me up. Fighting back tears, I picked up my phone to text my mom. I wanted to ask her to transfer me to another school. Perhaps I could make friends with someone there. I was focused on typing the message when I suddenly felt a very strong tug. I almost fell, but it was nothing compared to what happened next. Archie broke free of the leash and ran like a madman towards the blind boy who was coming down the stairs. I felt numb with horror. I knew that Archie was going to attack him for sure, but suddenly, instead of biting him, the dog froze halfway up the stairs. Then I saw everything happen as if it was in slow motion. The blind boy stumbled and started to fall, but at the last moment held on to my dog's back. It seemed Archie had known what was going to happen. He hadn't meant any harm. On the contrary, he wanted to help. After getting over my shock, I ran to the stairs to get my dog. However, it turned out the boy wasn't angry at me at all. Moreover, he thanked me and invited me to sit at his table during the lunch break. Surprised beyond belief, I agreed, of course. And very soon I realized that the whole school had witnessed that little incident. It might be hard to believe, but everyone suddenly wanted to be friends with me after that. My dogs and I suddenly became local heroes. A little later, I found out that Argo and Archie's owner used to be a blind man, so they used to help him. Unfortunately, he had died, but the dogs did not understand that and had apparently become angry because they thought they had been betrayed. That's how I realized that one small decision could change the entire life of a person. I had loved the dogs everyone else had given up on, and I'd helped save them. And they, in return, helped save me.
Hi, my name is Noah, and I want to tell you a story about me and my little sister, Emmy. The thing is, we had to live on the street for a while. Do you want to know why? Then subscribe to the channel, and I will tell you how we came to live in a cardboard box. Our parents passed away 10 years ago. Since my sister and I had no one else, we were immediately sent to an orphanage. Of course, it was worse than at home there. No one really cared about us or loved us the way Mom and Dad had. However, over time, we got used to it and realized that all we had left in the world was each other. During that time, we went through several orphanages. One of them got closed. Then we grew too big to stay in the next one. Finally, we came to stay in the third one. We didn't like it from the onset. The children there were mean and unfriendly, and the teachers treated us like we were prisoners. There were even special rooms for punishment there. If one of the children misbehaved, they got locked in such a room for several days. Emmy and I suffered and couldn't wait to be transferred to another orphanage. However, one day I found out that I was going to be staying there for good. I would already be an adult in a year and would be kicked out of there, while my sister would have to stay. I couldn't believe that. Very soon, I would have to leave my only family member behind and wouldn't be able to take care of her. Something had to be done. That's when we came up with an escape plan. One day, I got locked in the punishment room for standing up for my sister and getting into a fight with some other kids. I spent 3 days sitting there and realized that we couldn't afford to wait any longer. So, when I was finally let out, my sister and I waited for the right moment and ran away. Finally, no one tormented us anymore, and no one could separate us now. We were free to do as we pleased. However, that joy passed very quickly when evening came and we realized we had no place to sleep at. We found a large cardboard box in one of the alleys and got into it. Emmy fell asleep quickly, but I was looking at the stars and wondering why people were so mean. No one wanted to help or support us. The following day, I left Emmy in our new cardboard house and went looking for a job. Naturally, it wasn't easy. Many people even refused to talk to me when they heard that I was a bum and had no documents. I'd almost lost hope when I finally got lucky. I got a paper route and was paid very little money at the end of the day. It was enough to buy food for my sister and me. However, when I got back into the alley, I suddenly found Emmy missing. I got scared and started calling for her, but she was nowhere to be seen. I looked for her all over the neighborhood. Finally, I saw a familiar silhouette in the public library window by accident. Emmy was sitting inside and playing computer games without a care in the world. I scolded her for doing something so stupid. After all, she had scared me to death. But she just said that she had grown bored of sitting in the box. It was warm in the library and no one had tried to throw her out. She could also read books and play games for free there. Of course, she was right. But I still demanded that she not run away again. I reminded Emmy that we were surrounded by evil people we could only expect terrible things from. Emmy smiled and said that I was wrong. The world was full of good people, and we would definitely meet them. That's how life on the street began. I took whatever job I could find, washed dishes, and cleaned in exchange for food. Sometimes I would get lucky and people would give me a couple of sandwiches, looking disgusted. But more often than that, I got deceived and sent away after finishing the work. Those days were especially hard, as Emmy and I would have to go to sleep hungry. One such day, I was taking out the trash from a restaurant when its owner simply slammed the door in my face. There was nothing I could do, so I trudged back to our alley, upset. But when I crawled into our box, I saw Emmy smiling. She handed me a huge burger, French fries, and a Coke. Where had it all come from? My sister told me that she had met some guy that day who had taken her to dinner and fed her, and he had even given her money to buy food for me. I got angry and began to scold Emmy. "Are you crazy? You can't trust strangers. It's dangerous." She replied that he had been a good man who had just helped her and left. But I still did not believe in the kindness of strangers and insisted that all people were mean. Emmy tried to argue with me, but I didn't want to listen to her. I was convinced that I was right. After all, I had to protect and take care of my sister. That's why I decided to find another way to make money. I remembered a teacher from one of the orphanages teaching us to do magic tricks. I had memorized a few of them. I found everything I needed to make props in the garage and started performing on the street. I only made a few cents in a couple hours. All of a sudden, everything went to hell. A pair of policemen came around the corner. They came up to me and asked to see my documents. I knew it wouldn't end well for me, but it was too late to run. The police officers found out that I was living on the street and told me to go with them. I begged them to let me go because my little sister was waiting for me, but they didn't listen. That's how I ended up at the station. I had to admit that I had run away from an orphanage. The officers made a call and confirmed that I was telling the truth. An hour after that, they sat me in a car and drove me back to the orphanage. I asked the police to let me go and told them that Emmy was still out there on the street. But they didn't listen to me once again. I was back where I had run away from. I got sent to the punishment room for escaping at once. I shouted for them to find my sister because it was already dark outside. I imagined how scared Emmy would feel all alone out there, but I could do nothing to help her. Finally, alone, I started to think about what to do next. I had to get out of there and find Emmy as soon as possible. To do that, I had to calm down and put up with the rules of the orphanage. A few days later, I was finally released from that room. I had to endure and pretend to be calm, even though I was actually horrified that Emmy had been left all alone on the street. I waited until everyone had fallen asleep and got out of the orphanage. I ran as fast as I could. There was nothing I wanted more than to find my sister in that box. However, when I got to the alley in the early morning, I felt cold inside. Emmy wasn't there. I got terrified. I ran through the streets and called her name. I looked into all of the alleys hoping to see her. I went to all of the places we'd been together, but she was nowhere to be found. That's when I remembered the diner where that stranger had bought food for Emmy. I rushed there. When I asked if they had seen a poorly dressed girl at the diner, they told me that she had just come by several times. The first time she was with some guy, then a girl had fed her, and the last time she had come with both of them. That had been a couple of days before. Emmy hadn't come there since. I came back to the box that had been our home for a while. I felt terrified that I had lost my sister forever. I had been gone for a week. She must have gotten into trouble. But I decided it wasn't time to despair yet. I started taking on what jobs I could find. But now, instead of buying food, I spent all of the money on missing posters of Emmy and hung them up all over the neighborhood. I hoped someone had seen her and would tell me where she was. But time went on and Emmy didn't show up. One evening, I was sitting in my box, shivering with cold. I had not eaten for several days and felt like I was about to faint from hunger and fatigue. I could hardly keep my eyes open and found it impossible to distinguish between reality and dreams. Suddenly, I saw someone stop in front of me. I looked up and at first I thought I was hallucinating. Emmy was standing in front of me. "Hey Noah, where have you been for so long?" she asked. Everything immediately turned bright and joyful. I threw myself at her and hugged her. Tears were streaming down my face. I couldn't believe she was okay. I looked Emmy up and down. She was well-dressed, clean, and her hair looked nice too. She told me that a married couple had taken her in and was going to adopt her. I felt uneasy again. I couldn't believe that anyone would do such a good deed. But Emmy took my hand and said that she would introduce me to them. She took me to a small but tidy house where Mr. and Mrs. Hell lived. They were the ones who had been feeding my sister. They turned out to be very friendly and invited me to dinner. At the table, they told us that they used to live on the street, just like us, and knew full well how hard it was. That's why when they saw a lonely, frightened girl, they decided to help her. They offered to let me stay warm with them. I felt exhausted and, of course, agreed to stay the night. For the first time in years, I felt what it was like to be at home. It all seemed like a magical dream. Was I really lying on a clean bed under a roof and not dreaming about it in a dirty box? I spent half the night lost in thought. I realized that my sister was finally going to be okay. But what about me? Mr. and Mrs. Hell, though kind-hearted, weren't really well off. They probably weren't able to take both of us in, especially since I was already an adult and had to take care of myself. Emmy was right. There were good people in the world, but I didn't want to abuse their kindness, so I made a decision. Early the next morning, I was already on a bus to a neighboring town. I wanted to get a job at a logging company. The work was going to be hard, but that didn't scare me, especially since I knew my sister was going to be okay now. She was still fast asleep, and I'd left a letter laying beside her. I'd written how much I loved her and that I would never leave her. But first, I had to escape poverty and meet some good people of my own. And when I found my feet, I would definitely come back for her.
Hey guys, I'm Selena. Do you want to know why this video is black and white? Don't worry, your screen isn't broken. That's just the way my parents saw me, as a boring and unremarkable girl. I actually look like this. Voila! It's like I fell into a bucket of paint, right? The story I'm about to tell you is full of colors. After all, I learned to draw before I could even talk, and I'd always dreamed of becoming an artist and creating comics. Before I continue, please press that like button. Thanks! My parents often acted like boring adults. Hold on. They were boring adults. They never laughed or approved of my creative hobbies. All the colors in our house except brown and gray were banned. Boo. One day when I was 6, I took crayons and painted the walls in my bedroom. My parents went ballistic. Selena, did a unicorn throw up in here? Wash that off right this second. I couldn't express myself through my looks either. Mom and Dad bought me such nondescript and formal clothes. I looked like one of the grannies in our neighborhood. The day I turned 9, my parents told me that I would soon become an older sister. Yay! I started jumping for joy like a possessed rabbit. However, Mom and Dad told me to calm down again. Dial it down! Are you trying to break the floor? Something is seriously wrong with our child. When Charlotte was born, I was in for another disappointment. My parents had never spent much time with me to begin with, but after that, they seemed to have completely forgotten about my existence. All their affection was reserved for my younger sister. I didn't really mind. After all, I knew that the baby needed them more. I adored Charlotte. I'll always be there for you. Hurry and grow up so we can play together. Little had changed in our lives over the years. Charlotte stayed our parents' favorite, and I still wasn't allowed to wear any fashionable clothes. However, I didn't give up. I watched anime, played Genshin Impact, and I drew a comic called The Girl from the Rainbow. As you might have already guessed, the main character of my comic was very similar to me. My classmate Eric served as inspiration for the Prince of Elves the heroine was in love with. Look at that cutie. I had been pining for Eric since elementary school. However, I wasn't ever going to confess. His family was rich, and he was one of the most popular guys at school. Meanwhile, thanks to my parents, I was the plainest girl ever. He was way out of my league. One day, I was about to go to a festival of contemporary artists. I really wanted to get an autograph from my favorite comic book author, Gabriella X. She had always inspired me. I knew everything about her and felt a kindred spirit in her. However, before I could leave the house, my parents stopped me. They said they had to leave for a few hours, and they told me to watch over Charlotte. Damn it! The festival was only going to last one day. That was my only chance to meet Gabriella. I had to think of a solution, so I took my sister with me. Let's go on an adventure. However, you can't tell our parents about it. I'll draw you a dolphin as a thank you, okay?
I love dolphins.
We had a great time at the festival. We ate a ton of ice cream and took a bunch of cool selfies. And most importantly, I met my favorite artist. Gabriella X was just as amazing as I'd imagined. She was fun, had colorful hair, and wore bright clothes. I showed her photos of my work, and Gabriella liked them. You're quite talented, Selena. Here's my number. Let's work together sometime. We had to come back home before our parents could suspect anything. On the way home, Charlotte and I were suddenly caught in heavy rain. My sister and I got soaked through. The worst thing was that Mom and Dad had come back before us. They were furious when they found out I disobeyed their instructions. Selena, you're terribly irresponsible. We just went on a walk. What's wrong with that? They didn't listen to me, and they sent me to my room. I didn't get why they were being so dramatic. However, that night, Charlotte fell ill. She had a fever, and our parents immediately took her to a doctor. He said that my sister had a bad cold and would have to spend some time in the hospital. My parents looked at me like I was the biggest disappointment of their lives. After all, Charlotte had gotten sick because of me. I felt so guilty. I really wanted to hug my sister, but Mom and Dad forbade me from visiting her. Stay away from your sister! I felt terribly guilty, and I had no one to talk to. One day, I was coming back from school when my legs suddenly gave way. I sat down on the curb and I burst into tears. To my surprise, someone came up to me. Hey, don't cry. You have such beautiful eyes. It was Eric. He hugged me and asked me what was wrong. I had been waiting for someone to ask me that for so long. I told him about everything that bothered me. Everything! I even admitted that I had liked Eric for a long time and I drew him in my comics. Wow, I wasn't expecting this. Will you let me read them? It was too late to stop now. I took my comic book out of my backpack and handed it to Eric. He flipped through it enthusiastically. Wow. I had no idea you were so talented. I mean, Sorry, that's rude, but you don't normally stand out. I know, my parents want me to dress like an old lady. That's not fair. You should have the right to express yourself. I've got an idea. Eric brought me to a beauty salon and suggested I choose a bright color for my hair. Which one do you like best? Green? Blue? Red? It's so expensive. I don't have that kind of money. I'll pay for everything. Consider it a gift. You're a brilliant girl and you should look the part. His words inspired me. I thought about my favorite artist and I plucked up the courage to go for it. I want my hair to look like a rainbow. A few hours later, ta-da! Do you like my new look? I was so grateful to Eric. After all, I had been miserable lately. Finally, something good happened to me. We went shopping and I bought some new clothes. At parting, he asked me if he could take my comic with him to read it. I couldn't bring myself to tell him no. Could we become a couple? Ooh la la! Of course, at home, my parents threw a fit when they saw I dyed my hair. You look like a unicorn burp, I know. But you know what? I like it. No, you will dye it back or you will no longer be our daughter. And stop doodling already. Your comics are nothing but trouble. At that moment, I noticed Charlotte in the hallway. Had she finally been discharged? I wanted to hug my sister, but my parents wouldn't let me near her. We told you to stay away from Charlotte. On top of everything, they suddenly said that they were sending my sister to a special camp so she could swim with dolphins and recover. Since it's all your fault, Selena, we decided it would be fair to pay for it with your college money. I couldn't stand it any longer and I ran to my room. I felt so unwanted. I hoped Eric would cheer me up at school, but things only got worse. For some reason, when I came to school the next day, all of my classmates were pointing their fingers at me and giggling nastily. Oh, look, it's that girl that fell off a rainbow. This weirdo has a crush on Eric. He told me she doesn't stand a chance with him. That's when I noticed that everyone was reading my comic book. Had Eric given it to our classmates so everyone would laugh at me? But he'd seemed so sweet. His betrayal was the last straw for me. I could no longer put up with my parents' disdain or my classmates' behavior. I remembered Gabriella's biography. No one had believed in her either. When she was my age, she ran away from home and achieved success despite everyone. I decided I would do the same. While my parents were driving Charlotte to camp, I left a note with a dolphin in my sister's room, packed my things, and left. I wandered the streets for a long time, trying to figure out what to do. My stomach was rumbling, and I decided that first I had to find a part-time job to buy food. That's when I remembered I had Gabriella's number. Ding, ding, ding! I called her and I asked if she had any work for me. The artist gave me the address of her studio, and I headed there. But first, I turned off my phone so my parents wouldn't be able to find me. Soon, I was there. I was just about to walk into the studio when the door opened and a gloomy girl ran into me. Get out of the way! Didn't you see me coming? There's no need to be so rude, Miss Hulk. You look like a magic pony. I'm not about to listen to anything you say. With those words, the girl stomped away. What a rude stinker. There was a certain creative chaos in Gabriella's studio. The artist herself was sitting dejectedly on the floor among a pile of crumpled drafts. Selena, there you are. I like your new look. We chatted for a while and she sadly admitted that she'd had an artistic crisis. I have no ideas for my new comic. That was easy to fix. I had a ton of ideas. I told her about them and she threw her arms around me. Selena, you're a lifesaver. That's brilliant. You should become my co-author. Of course, I agreed. We decided that I would come to the studio the next morning and we would get to work. In the meantime, I needed to find a place to spend the night. I wanted to get a hotel room, but it turned out that I couldn't afford it. I only had enough money to buy a donut for dinner. I ate it and decided to spend the night on a bench. However, it was dark and cold in the park. Ugh. I tried to fall asleep, but then someone patted me on the shoulder. I yelped in surprise. To my relief, it was only Gabriella. Selena, what are you doing here? I had no choice but to admit that I'd fought with my parents and run away from home. I thought she would start lecturing me, but to my surprise, she just smiled warmly. When I was your age, I rebelled against my serious parents, too. They didn't understand me and forbade me from drawing, so I get it. But sleeping on the streets is dangerous. You can stay at my place until you make up with your family. I couldn't believe I'd got so lucky. However, when we came to Gabriella's home, I saw that mean girl from the studio. What's this rainbow princess doing here? Don't be rude. This is my student Selena. She's gonna be staying with us for a while. The girl's name was Nadine. I was really surprised when I found out that she was Gabriella's daughter. Can you believe it? They were complete opposites of each other. Nadine didn't want me there and made no effort to hide it. However, it didn't worry me. For the first time in my life, I felt good about my life. I was living with my idol and working on my own comic book. That was everything I'd ever dreamed of. Gabriella and I were very similar and understood each other perfectly. We had a lot of inside jokes and could spend hours discussing our ideas. We spent every minute of the day together. My parents had never done that. However, Gabriella had a strained relationship with her own daughter. Nadine was as emotionless as a biscuit and had absolutely no imagination. One day, Gabriella and I decided to draw on the floor using ketchup. That pissed Nadine off. You're both nuts. Come back down to earth and do something useful around the house for once. What a bore. One day, I was walking to the studio when I saw Eric. I started walking faster, but he caught up to me. Selena, where have you been? Your parents are worried out of their minds. Come back to school. I left them a note. They know I'm fine. But why are you avoiding me? Let me think. Maybe because you gave my comic book to our classmates and told everyone about my crush. You could have just said you weren't interested instead of mocking me. No, you've got it all wrong. That day, someone pulled the comic book out of my backpack without my permission. I was so pissed when I found out it had fallen into the wrong hands. He turned red and explained why we couldn't become an item. I just don't like girls. You know what I mean? But I like you as a person, and I want to be your friend. Oh, so that was the reason. I felt relieved, and I came to the studio in a great mood. Unfortunately, Gabriella and Nadine were fighting when I walked in. What happened? Gabriella told me that her daughter had destroyed everything we'd been working on for so long. What? How dare she? It serves you right. You're such a great team. I'm sure you'll manage to draw a new comic soon enough. Congrats, Mom. You finally have the daughter you'd always dreamed of. I'm done with you. I finally realized why Nadine couldn't stand me. She was jealous of my relationship with Gabriella. Poor thing. I felt so sorry for her. Nadine, wait. I know how you feel. My parents didn't get me, and they only cared about my sister. I'm sorry that my presence made you feel unwanted. Then I turned to her mom and said that she shouldn't ignore her daughter just because they were different. You're a family. Nothing is more important than that. They were both moved to tears by my speech, so they hugged and asked each other for forgiveness. Not gonna lie, I teared up too. You're right, Selena. There really is nothing more important than family. Do you know what that means? It's time for me to make up with my parents? Exactly, baby. To be honest, I missed my parents and my sister, so I plucked up the courage and I went home. I thought my parents would scream until they were hoarse when they saw me, but they surprised me. Mom and Dad burst into tears and hugged me tight. Oh, Selena, our dear girl, we were worried sick. How could you run away like that? I felt like such a disappointment. I was a bad daughter and a terrible older sister. Charlotte even got sick because of me. I'm sorry. I'm sorry that we made you feel like a stranger in your own home. We should have supported you. Then, my parents said that Charlotte had a weak immune system. When the doctors examined her, they found out she had some sort of disease. It hadn't progressed far yet. Since we found out about it early, my sister could be completely cured. So it all worked out for the best. We were so stressed out that we said a lot of things we regret. Everything's going to be fine now. And you know what? This hairstyle suits you. You should keep working on your art. We won't stand in your way anymore. Soon, Charlotte came back from the camp and we became a big and friendly family. I went back to school. Eric might never become my boyfriend, but he is an amazing friend. Nadine thanked me for helping her break through to her mom. Eric and I became her friends, and now the three of us are helping Gabriella come up with ideas for her comics. My own comic is gonna be released soon. I'm talking about The Girl from the Rainbow. Hi, I'm Margot, and I had a pretty terrible childhood. Mom and Dad didn't really care where I was spending my time or even what I was doing. They fed and clothed me pretty terribly, and my classmates constantly bullied me. It was no shock that I grew up to be a reserved teenager. the only thing that made me happy was singing. I tried to convince my parents to get me a vocal coach, but they just said, "We don't have the money for that kind of nonsense." But they always had enough for all sorts of parties. Of course, I was really hurt. I wasn't gonna give up on my hobby. I always sang at home, which infuriated my parents. Usually, they just turned on the TV really loudly to try and drown out my voice. But one day, they went too far. I'd been in a great mood that night. After all, I was supposed to compete in a music contest on stage for the first time that next day. I had been practicing a Rihanna song in my room when my dad burst in looking really annoyed. "When will you finally shut up? We have guests. They're all annoyed by those awful wails." I promised I would sing quieter, but my parents still weren't satisfied with that. And in the end, my mom grabbed me and threw me outside. "Just sing your stupid songs here. When you get cold, knock. We'll let you back in." I ended up standing outside in my pajamas. It was snowing and an icy wind was blowing, so in just a few minutes my teeth were chattering. But I wasn't gonna give up, so I sang for almost an hour until I finally lost my voice. And then I knocked on the door. My hand was shaking so bad from the cold, and for some reason, no one opened. I started banging on the door with all of my strength, and when that didn't help either, I jumped up and tried to look in the window. My parents were asleep on the couch, and their guests had passed out right at the table. Everyone had just forgotten I was there. I couldn't feel my legs anymore, and I turned blue all over from the cold. So, out of desperation, I dug out a big stone from the snow, and I started to swing it to break the window and climb inside. But all of a sudden, a neighbor called me over to the fence. "Margot, what are you doing?" I ended up telling her the whole truth, and that kind woman let me stay the night. She even gave me hot tea and wrapped me up in warm blankets and put me to bed. "When you wake up, I'll take you to your parents." I fell asleep, feeling happy. However, in the morning, I saw a man instead of my parents. He brought me to an orphanage, and I was so scared I couldn't focus on what was going on around me. I don't know how much time I spent there before I was finally sent to a foster family living in another state. The Bakers turned out to be good people. Mrs. Baker was a vocal coach, and seeing my talent, she helped me train my voice and even taught me how to play the piano. I immediately liked her son Jacob, and at first, we were just friends. But by the time we'd grown up, we'd become a couple. And long story short, my life was really great. But I did really miss my parents, no matter how badly they had treated me. I was sure that this whole time they had probably been looking for me, and they probably really regretted what they'd done. So as soon as I came of age, Jacob and I packed our clothes, came to my hometown, and rented an apartment. Jacob got a job, and I decided to do what I'd come back for at once. I went to my parents' house. My heart was pounding when I saw the familiar front yard. Almost nothing had changed despite the years that had passed. However, I wondered, who was that girl? As I got closer, I saw that she looked a lot like me. My parents had probably given up on finding me and had just had another child. And that's when I met my sister. Rita turned out to be a very friendly girl. She told me that she loved to dance, but her mean parents wouldn't let her practice and constantly turned off her music. I was upset. What had happened to me hadn't taught them anything. I was listening to Rita and trying not to cry when I heard a familiar voice behind me. "Rita, how many times have I told you not to talk to strangers?" With a smile, I turned around and I spread my arms open to hug my mom. But she just frowned. "Oh, it's you. Well, come in if you want." That was not how I'd imagined our meeting would go. I followed my mom into the house, but she folded her hands in front of her and, without even offering me anything to drink, asked, "Look, why are you here? Do you need money? Here, take it." Mom took a thin wad of money out of the closet and threw it at me. "Just don't come here again, please. The child services won't leave us alone because of you. They're constantly coming to see how Rita is. And please, don't tell her that you're her sister. There's really no need to upset her." I threw the money on the table and stormed out of the house. I could barely hold back my tears and everything around me was blurry. But somehow, I managed to get back home. But I still burst into tears. I was hysterical, breaking all the dishes and collapsing onto the bed with no strength left in my body. Jacob only barely managed to calm me down. And from that day on, life lost its colors for me. I stopped smiling, stopped taking care of myself, stopped cleaning the house. The apartment just didn't feel like home anymore. At first, Jacob tried to support me through my depression, but then he got tired of my sour face. He started to stay late at work more and more often. And one day, I found out why. That day, I was shopping at the supermarket and I saw Jacob. He was holding some girl's hand and choosing drinks. I didn't make a scene. I had no tears or emotions left for that. I just went home, sat down at the piano, and started singing. The notes and the words came to me all by themselves. And that's how I composed my very first song. It turned out sad, but so beautiful. I closed the piano lid, packed my things, and I put the engagement ring on the dining room table. But then I bumped into Jacob at the door. He understood immediately what was going on without me even having to say anything. "I'm sorry, Margot. Please, stay here. I know you have nowhere to go, and the apartment is paid for until the end of the month." Jacob left by himself, and I was all alone. I had to find a job to keep living somehow. So I opened my laptop and started looking through the vacancies. But then someone rang the doorbell. Did you forget something? But it wasn't Jacob standing there. "Miss Evans, I finally found you!" My guest introduced himself as Peter White, an employee of a law firm. He handed me his business card and a folder. Inside were some documents and a key to a safe deposit box. "I'm sorry, there's probably some kind of mistake here." "Not at all. You probably don't remember your grandfather. You were very young at the time. Mr. Evans was very rich, but also terminally ill. He saw the kind of lifestyle your parents led and made you, his granddaughter, the sole heiress to his fortune. You can only get it now that you're an adult." This all seemed like some kind of joke to me. I spent the evening trying to digest this news, and in the morning, I went to the bank to check everything. I was led to my safety deposit box. I took the key, opened it, and I shouted for joy. There was a ton of money inside. In just one day, I'd gone from struggling as a beggar, abandoned by everyone, to being a rich woman. And that, of course, called for a celebration. I had lunch at the most expensive restaurant in the city, shopped in luxurious boutiques, and visited an amazing spa. At night, I went to an elite nightclub. I only made my way back home in the morning, tired but blissfully happy. I was about to go to bed when I got a message. I almost dropped my phone in surprise. It was Rita. She had suggested that we meet. I sent a taxi for my sister, and in a couple of hours, I met her at my house. She hugged me and said through her tears,
I heard your talk with Mom, and I know that you're my sister. I have no one else to talk to. Living with them is awful. They pretend to be caring parents, but that's only when child services come to visit. They don't actually care about me.
I understood Rita like no one else, and I promised that I would make sure things were better for her. And we chatted for several hours. Rita turned out to be such a kind and cheerful girl. I decided I would share a secret with her, and I sang the song that I'd composed after Jacob's betrayal. Rita filmed my performance on video, and when I finished, she suggested that we post it on TikTok.
That was so cool, sis! You could totally become popular.
But I was pretty afraid of getting hate comments. I'd had enough negativity in my life already, so Rita couldn't manage to convince me. In the evening, I walked her home and I went to bed. And in the morning, I woke up to the sound of countless notifications. Rita had sent me a ton of joyful emoticons and stickers, and when I opened the link she'd sent me, I jumped straight out of my bed. That little trickster had posted my song after all, and it got 2 million views? From that day on, a new life began for me. I started writing songs, filming TikToks, and getting thousands of likes. My audience grew at a furious pace. I invested my grandfather's money into improving my skills, recording songs in professional studios, filming awesome music videos, and taking even more vocal lessons. And only a year later, I had become a real star. I collabed with famous musicians and appeared on the most popular shows. Even top bloggers reposted my performances. As you've probably guessed, I became ridiculously rich. The first thing I did was send part of it to my foster family for all the good they had done for me. And Peter and I started dating again, and even got married after a while. We bought a luxurious mansion in Beverly Hills. Rita started visiting us every weekend, and I was happy. But then something ruined my mood. That day, I returned from a tour, and I saw my parents near my house. "Margot, dear, forgive us. We've realized how wrong we were to you." Mom started crying and reaching out to me, looking pitiful. But a cheap trick like that wouldn't work on me. I knew perfectly well they only wanted money from me. So I asked my security guards to show the uninvited guests out. However, getting rid of them wasn't that easy. My parents started following me and appearing everywhere I went. At home, at concerts, near my studio. I just had to start pretending I couldn't see them.
But one day, I got a strange call from Child Services.
Miss Evans, your parents were in a car accident. Come take Rita or she'll be sent to an orphanage.
I'd never been so scared. I arranged for Rita to be brought to me immediately, and a couple of hours later, I was already hugging her. Yes, my sister was safe, but I still felt so uneasy. I felt bad for my parents, even after everything they had done, and I wanted to give them a third chance. So I used my connections to find out which hospital they were at, and I rushed over there. When I walked into their ward, I screamed and I dropped my oranges. Mom and Dad were sitting in wheelchairs, all bandaged up. Tears ran down my face. I knelt down and I hugged my parents, even though we had never been close before. I decided I would do everything so that Mom and Dad could get back on their feet as soon as possible. I paid the doctor, and my parents were transferred into the best ward. They started to give my parents the most expensive medicines. My parents' phones had also broken in the accident, so I gave them brand new iPhones so they would always be in touch with me. And most importantly, I bought them a house in Beverly Hills next door to ours, so I could always take care of them with no issues. After they were discharged, my parents moved, and we began spending time together, just like a normal family would. At Christmas, I decided I would surprise them. I put vouchers for a trip to the Maldives for wheelchair users in a sock, and I snuck into their house to hang up the gift on the Christmas tree. But then, I suddenly heard someone open the door. I hung up the sock and I hid in the closet to see my parents' reaction. However, something terrible happened. Mom and Dad suddenly jumped out of their wheelchairs, took off their bandages, and opened a cocktail bottle. Dad raised his glass and said in a solemn voice,
To our doctor, Mr. Scott, who confirmed our beautiful story to that absolute fool.
My world collapsed again, but I wasn't gonna cry. I refused to feel sorry for myself anymore. I jumped out of the closet and I told my parents everything I really thought about them just then. And after I kicked them out of the house, they took Rita away from me. Not because they loved her, but just because they wanted to spite me. My sister was crying and begging me not to leave her, but the law was on the side of our parents. Ever since that day, Peter and I had only been thinking about how to get Rita back. But even with my connections and his legal talent, nothing worked out. We were getting really desperate when I suddenly got another call from Child Services.
Miss Evans, your parents were in a car accident again and are badly injured. They're in hospital right now. Please come and take your sister.
I was all too happy to bring Rita home. Of course, I didn't believe a word they said about my parents. They were so lazy they hadn't even come up with a new scheme to get money. It made me so mad. I decided maybe I would finally punish them for their blatant lies. I took the police with me to the hospital to expose those liars, and I burst into the ward. But I didn't see what I'd been expecting to see. Mom was lying on the bed, crippled and helpless. All she could do was blink. I wasn't even sure she actually recognized me. In a trembling voice, I asked the doctor where Dad was. But he just lowered his eyes to the floor and put his hand on my shoulder.
My condolences, miss. Your father died in intensive care.
Hi, I'm Monica. Do you want to hear about the adventure that changed my life? You sure? Then let's get it on.
Wee woo, you have the right to remain silent.
Hey, you were the cop last time. That's my older brother Thomas. We both admired Dad because he was a police officer and a hero. Before I was born, Dad had saved a lot of people from a fire. The mayor had even awarded him an honorary medal. Wow, I'm going to be a cop when I grow up. Aside from that, we were completely different. My brother was obedient and quiet, while my mom affectionately called me a demon in a skirt. One day, the city was preparing for a Thanksgiving Day parade. Each school was creating a platform that would be paraded along the main street as usual. Guys, we need to choose a theme for our platform. Let's go with SpongeBob. Superheroes are cooler. Ugh, their ideas sucked. I wanted the theme to be my favorite fairy tale, Rapunzel, but everyone supported Thomas's dumb idea. Ugh, everyone loved Thomas. I was always in his shadow. Do you think I burst into tears? Ha, you don't know me very well yet then. As soon as the classes were over, I sneaked into the hangar with our platform to put my Rapunzel doll on it. However, as I was climbing up, I accidentally pressed some lever, and the platform started moving. Oh dear, I was so scared. I jumped off and ran away. The platform crashed into a wall and, ta-dam, turned into a pile of junk. In the morning, everyone at school saw that we had nothing to present at the parade anymore. I was too ashamed to tell the truth. No one would have found out what had happened if it hadn't been for my brother. Hey, it's Monica's doll. How could I forget to hide the evidence? Everyone thought I had destroyed the platform on purpose. Thomas turned into a school hero. You'll become a great cop just like your father. Meanwhile, I got labeled a delinquent. There's a new sheriff in town. Nothing's changed over the years. Thomas was an excellent student and made our parents proud. As for me, to the principal's office. I'm going to have words with your parents. You're grounded for a week. Well, you get it. I was a headache for my parents and teachers and got punished for everything. Meanwhile, Thomas was doted on. Ugh. I wish Mr. Everybody Loves Me would go to college already. Let's pause here, and I'll tell you about Nick. Who's that? Well, Nick was the hottest guy in our school. Look at him. I was head over heels in love with him, but he didn't even notice me. Nick was my brother's classmate. It was their last year in school, and they were preparing for prom. It was my dream to go with Nick. But Thomas and Nick were competing for the heart of the prettiest girl in school, Olivia. Will you go to prom with me? No, choose me. Ew, what did they see in her? Of course, Olivia chose my brother, and Nick was left with nothing. I decided that was my chance. I heard you didn't have a date. Do you want to ask the most beautiful girl in school to prom? I do. Where is she? Right in front of you, dummy. That's a good joke, shorty. But you're too young for me. I was outraged. I wasn't some kid. I already know how to drive a car. Oh, really? All right. If you pick me up, we'll go to prom together. Whee! The problem was that I lied to him. I didn't have a car, but since everyone thought I was a delinquent anyway, I decided to act accordingly. I got into my dad's company car without asking for permission and realized that I didn't know how to drive. I started poking at all the buttons and accidentally turned on the siren. Oh no! I hit the nearest hydrant and that was the end of my adventure. I never heard my dad shout like that before. One more such stunt and you'll spend the next year at your grandfather's farm. Oh no. Trust me, that was the worst punishment possible. Grandpa was a former military man. He was so strict and grumpy. I tried to be on my best behavior after that. Shortly after graduation, Thomas left for college. Do you think my life got better after that? Yeah, right. Mom and Dad paid rent for his apartment, so I was left without any pocket money. Ugh. One day, my friend Sarah told me that all my classmates were going to a Justin Bieber concert. I was his fan too. So I asked my parents for money to buy a ticket. Unfortunately, I knew what they were going to say. I'm sorry, Monica, but it's too expensive. Nonsense! A month ago, they'd bought a ticket to a Selena Gomez concert for Thomas. I wasn't about to give up. I tried to get a job as a babysitter or a dog walker, but everyone knew me as a troublemaker with an explosive temper, so they didn't trust me. Please kill me. It made my blood boil, and I complained to Sarah about the unfairness of it all. If your parents love your brother more than you, then I have bad news for you. You might be adopted. That was crazy. But then again, I'd always felt like a black sheep. In the evening, I decided to look for clues and sneaked into Dad's study to poke around. Well, well, well. What do we have here? At the bottom of his desk drawer, I found a folder with documents from an orphanage. Can you imagine? I fell over in shock. Was I really adopted? But I didn't have the time to look through them because the next second, Dad burst into the room. Oops, that was clearly not my day. Monica, you're trying my patience. What are you doing here? I was about to answer when someone suddenly slammed the front door. We went out into the corridor and saw Thomas, the last person I wanted to see. Son, why didn't you say you were coming? Are you all right? You're white as a sheet. She was right. My brother was disgustingly optimistic. But at that moment, he looked gloomier than ever. He talked to Mom and Dad in the study about something for a long time. At some point, I realized that they were arguing. Was Perfect Thomas disagreeing with our parents? Wow, Pinch me, I must be dreaming. Then he abruptly ran out into the corridor. He seemed to have gone bonkers. I hate you! He slammed the door loudly and spent the rest of the day in his room. At night, I heard strange noises coming from the corridor and decided to see what was going on. I looked out and saw someone tiptoeing out of my dad's study in complete darkness. I was about to shout that we were being robbed when I realized that it was Thomas. He looked around furtively and ran out of the house. Why was he acting so weird? Okay, I'll play Sherlock tomorrow. Now it's time to sleep. In the morning, I decided that it must have all been a dream, but then I heard Dad shout. What was I being accused of again? Monica J. Dawson, did you take the money from the family safe? We had a safe? Dad shouted so loudly my ears hurt. Let me translate his screeches into English. He had discovered the loss of our savings and was accusing me of stealing them. After all, I'd recently begged my parents for a concert ticket. Can you imagine? I told him what I'd seen the night before. Thomas must have done it. Don't try to shift the blame. He wouldn't have done that. I'll give you a day to put the money back. It's your choice. Return it or go to the farm. That was so unfair. I left for school, slamming the door on my way out. I was definitely adopted. After all, my parents never took my side. I didn't want to go to my grandfather's farm, so I called Thomas, hoping to convince him to return the stolen money. But that jerk didn't answer. On the way to school, I ran into Nick. Hello, Shorty. It's Monica. Yeah, sorry. It's just that you're so cute when you get angry. Listen, your brother forgot his notebook at the diner where I worked last night. Could you tell him that? Sure, as soon as I find him. I took the notebook, opened it, and saw... a strange list with 4 items in it. They were to ride a sports car while he still had the time, to watch a movie at the Autumn Movie Festival, to kiss Selena Gomez, and finally, to solve a crime like he'd always dreamed. What? What did it mean? Nick saw my confusion and also looked at the notebook. To ride a sports car while he still has the time? He wrote down the address of a car rental agency. I've heard of it. Their clients are all rich and famous. Where would Thomas get the money for it? That was when it dawned on me. He had definitely stolen our family savings. Ugh, that jerk! He'd fool everyone into thinking he was an innocent little angel. My parents wouldn't believe me. But I had to stop my brother before he spent all the money. There was only one problem. The agency was in a nearby town, and it would take me 2 hours to get there by bus. I wish someone would show up in a car and offer me a ride. At that moment, Olivia drove up to us. I knew that she kept dating Thomas even after he had left for college. She seemed to be on the verge of tears. It was obvious Nick was still into her. Monica, is your brother okay? He suddenly broke up with me over text, and now he isn't answering my calls. Where can I find him? I'm worried. I shook the notebook in the air angrily. I know exactly where he is. Give me a ride and you'll get the honor of being the first one to slap him. I told Olivia what was going on, and she immediately agreed to come with me. Nick's eyes lit up too. Girls, I'm coming with you. I've always dreamed of going there. Yeah, right. He just wanted to be closer to Olivia because he was still pining for her. Whatever. That was my chance to show Nick I wasn't a kid anymore. Soon our, love triangle got to the sports car rental agency. Unfortunately, we were in for a disappointment. It turned out we just missed Thomas. He had already rented the most expensive car they had. Ugh, was he kidding me? Don't panic. The next item on his list is the Autumn Movie Festival. It's not far from here. Let's go. However, when we got there, we found out we couldn't attend that fancy event without a ticket. That was too much. Don't make things worse, Shorty. Nick and Olivia thought we should wait by the door for the festival to end and for Thomas to come out. But as you probably realized already, I wasn't particularly patient. I saw an animator in a Rapunzel costume take off her wig and leave for lunch. I decided it was a sign. I put on the wig and tried to fool the security guards, saying that I was an animator at the festival, but I won't tell you the details. But you can already see that my plan failed. Ugh! Don't move or I'll drop you. We waited for Thomas by the exit. Soon, the festival was over and the crowd poured into the street. Among them, No, it couldn't be. I saw Thomas with Selena Gomez herself on his arm. My jaw dropped to the floor. Oh no! Kissing her is the next item on Thomas's list. We tried to shout to my brother, but he was standing among the screaming fans and didn't hear us. Then, Thomas and Selena got into a gorgeous sports car and drove away. I prayed there was at least 1 cent left of our parents' savings. Hurry up, follow them! I can't see anything because of your stupid wig. It's not stupid, it's awesome. We're going to lose them. Hold on tight, let's do this. Olivia was so afraid that her boyfriend would hook up with Selena Gomez that she drove like crazy. Meanwhile, I was looking at Selena Gomez's social media and trying to figure out what she was doing in that city. That was weird. It said on Selena Gomez's official website that she was giving a concert in another country at the moment. Something wasn't adding up. Thomas parked the rental car by a small house. We stopped by it, and Olivia and I rushed to the doors. Thomas, you cowardly chicken, come out here and explain yourself. If I'm sent to Grandpa's farm because of you, you're finished. No one opened the door, but Nick walked around the house and said happily, "Ladies, the basement window is open. Shorty is the only one who will be able to get in there. Come on, Monica, this is your time to shine." I wanted to snap back and tell him not to call me that anymore. But then, Nick gave me a peck on the cheek for good luck. Whee! Be honest, am I red as a lobster? The window was tiny, but I managed to get in anyway. I was nervous. It almost made me wish I hadn't followed my brother. I ended up in the basement and immediately heard police sirens outside. Oh, how was I going to explain why I had broken into someone else's house? And then I got tangled in the wig, almost fell, and accidentally turned off the light. Someone put a hand on my shoulder. What the heck? I yelped and pushed them away. However, when I turned the light back on, I saw that it was Thomas. Monica? What are you doing here? What are you doing here? I've been chasing you all day. He tried to say something, but then we heard screams coming from the street. We ran outside and saw that Olivia and, Selena Gomez were fighting like wildcats. You shouldn't have stolen my boyfriend. The police and Nick scratched their heads in puzzlement. Yeah, that wasn't something you saw every day. She's impersonating Selena Gomez. Arrest her. It turned out that girl was a fraud. She used the fact that she looked a lot like Selena Gomez to give concerts. She pretended to sing to fool the actual star's fans. Thomas had met her at the movie festival. She had seen his car, decided that he was filthy rich, and asked him over. Then, Thomas had found out the truth and called the cops. Even though I didn't get a kiss, I got to solve a crime. I think it's about time you explain what's going on. My brother sighed gloomily and told me that not so long ago, he found out he had a rare retinal disease. What? I'm going to lose sight soon. But the thing is, it's a genetic disease. When I started talking about it with Mom and Dad, I found out I was adopted. I said some things, stole money, and decided to fulfill my childhood dreams while I still could. I shouldn't have done any of it. Oh God, I didn't know. It turned out the documents I had seen had nothing to do with me. He apologized for setting me up and called Mom and Dad to explain everything. This is our fault too. We shouldn't have kept the truth from you. Remember when I told you Dad had become a hero when he saved people from a fire? Well, it turned out that Thomas was one of them. He lost all his relatives, so we adopted him. Monica, I'm sorry that we made you feel unloved. Come on, dealing with me was no picnic either. I felt so relieved after we cleared everything up. I hugged my brother and told him that someone else had also been terribly worried about him. Oh yeah, Olivia. I'm sorry I left you in the dark. I was afraid you'd dump me if I went blind, so I broke up with you first. Tell me, I love you and will always support you. By the way, soon, the real Selena Gomez found out that her impersonator had been arrested thanks to my brother and paid for Thomas's surgery as a thank you. He is already on the mend and is preparing to go back to school. Don't worry about me. I'm doing great too. See for yourself. Hello, Monica. You know, you're fun. I've been thinking about you a lot since our trip. I know you're graduating this year. Do you already have a prom date? There's this handsome guy I know.
Hi everyone, I'm Claire and I'm 16 years old, 15 of which I spent in an orphanage. I hated it there, but one day they told me to pack my things and say goodbye to my friends. I would have a family now. With a trembling hand, I opened the door of my new house and I was immediately hugged by 2 smiling people. "Welcome home, daughter. We're your parents from now on." I burst out crying from happiness, and suddenly, through my tears, I saw 4 more silhouettes, and they were boys. Just imagine, in one day, I had not only found a mom and a dad, but also 4 brothers. Ethan had been born first, then Oscar, and Peter, and finally Dan. That's how my new life began. I felt like I was in heaven for half a year. My parents doted on me because they finally had a daughter. And as for the boys, I can't say they were happy about the addition to the family, but at least they were patient with my girly whims. Until one morning, when I woke up with a terrible sore throat. After stuffing me with medicine, my parents went to work and left my brothers to look after me. They took care of me the whole day, ordering me pizza, giving me their console. One of them even did my homework. I was loving every second of it. Until, in the evening, Ethan came to give me cough syrup. I obediently opened my mouth, and Ethan suddenly hit me painfully in the teeth with a spoon. What are you doing?
I missed a football match because of you, and my team lost. Why did you have to fall ill now?
It's not like I did it on purpose.
Our parents don't fuss over any of us this much, even though we're their children by blood. Look how much they spoiled you, a girl that isn't even theirs.
And with those words, Ethan stormed out, leaving me at a complete loss. The next morning, though, I had already felt much better. That day, I had simply no right to be sick. After all, I was turning 16. It was the first birthday I would ever celebrate with my family. My parents let me invite friends over and throw a party. So by the evening, our house was filled with guests, noise, and fun. And when I opened my eyes the next morning, I saw the angry faces of my brothers. It seemed my wish had not come true. Ethan screamed so loudly, I felt like my head was about to crack open. What have you done? Mom and Dad are about to return from their night shift. But I don't remember. I don't think I've done anything. But oh, how wrong I was. Our house looked like the devil and his entire entourage had been partying all night in it. I panicked and I rushed to wipe the puddles of yesterday's cocktails and gather the pizza boxes when we heard the front door shut and a voice rang out. "Kids, we're home!" Mom came upstairs and grabbed her head. I was about to start crying and begging for forgiveness when my mom suddenly snapped at Ethan. "Aren't you ashamed of yourself? You are the oldest and you couldn't even keep an eye on your sister. I hope a month of house arrest will knock some sense into you." And after that, she left, and Ethan shot me a withering look. It seemed like I'd unwittingly made a bitter enemy. I felt terrible about it all, and I bought him a new PlayStation game to somehow make amends the next day. I was walking home, rehearsing my apologies, when suddenly someone snatched my phone from my hand. "Hey, wait, stop!" But the thief was already too far away by that point. I had gone and let everyone down again. I lost the phone that my parents had given me on the first day we'd met. What a loser. I felt so helpless. I sat down on the curb and I burst into tears. But then I felt someone's palm on my shoulder. That damn thief. I'll show him. I jumped to my feet, raised my fist, and I unexpectedly saw Ethan. I told him what had just happened to me, and I prepared to listen to him scold me. But also unexpectedly, my brother said kindly,
"Claire, I'm really sorry. Don't be sad though. I promise not to tell our parents. After all, we are a family."
I hugged him and I handed him the game that I'd bought him. On the way home, I told him how awful my life had been at the orphanage. Ethan nodded understandingly, and he comforted me. So we came back home as friends. But that wasn't even the most pleasant thing that day. Our parents had gone on a business trip for 3 days, and Oscar, Peter, and Dan had bought burgers, which Mom and Dad usually didn't let us eat. We ate so much fast food, we couldn't even get to our rooms and we fell asleep right in the living room. In the morning, I woke up happier than ever. We all sat down to have breakfast together when Ethan suddenly suggested,
"Hey Claire, why don't we all go on a picnic together while our folks are out on a business trip?"
It wasn't hard to convince me. I put some juices, sandwiches, and vegetables in baskets, took a camera, and settled comfortably in the front seat of Ethan's car. When everyone was finally ready, we turned up the music really loud and drove into the forest. 2 hours later, we were in a sunny clearing. The noise from the highway didn't reach out here, and I breathed in the smell of freshly cut grass. It was a real high. I took some of the baskets of food from the car, kicked off my shoes, and ran barefoot across the field when a sharp pain suddenly pierced my left foot. Ah! My leg! My leg! My brothers immediately ran up to me, and I looked at my foot with horror. Oh no, glass was sticking out of it. But as it turned out, I didn't really have a reason to be scared. Ethan took out a first aid kit from the car and carefully removed the glass. And then he bandaged my foot. Now, only a slight tingling reminded me of the ridiculous injury. And of course, that didn't stop me from having fun. We played badminton and board games, we ate sandwiches, and we sang songs. The little girl inside me, who had wanted a family for her whole life, was rejoicing. And when it got dark, we started telling scary stories around the campfire. When it was my turn, I asked my brothers to wait just a little bit, and I ran into the bushes to do my business. But when I came back out, neither my brothers nor the car were in the clearing anymore. I put my hand in my pocket to get my phone, and I immediately remembered, damn, it had been stolen. But I didn't panic. Maybe my brothers had just left to get more food or drinks, and they'd be back any minute. After all, we had been having so much fun together. But then an hour passed, and no one came back to pick me up. My hopes were starting to fade pretty fast. After an hour and a half had passed, I realized that they had abandoned me, alone, in the middle of a dark forest. I had never been so scared. The trunks of the pines looked like someone was about to jump out from behind them, and it was so ominous. I felt like I was being watched every second, and when I saw the bushes start moving, I screamed and started running with all of my might in just a random direction. I don't know how long I spent running, but eventually, I heard traffic again. I was saved! I rushed towards it, and soon I found myself on the side of the road. Bright headlights blinded me, and I covered my face with my hands. Someone stopped just a couple of meters away and casually asked,
Where are you heading, girl?
After my eyes had gotten used to the light, I managed to make out the face of a smiling man. I really didn't have any choice. Staying alone at night on an unfamiliar highway would have been a much crazier idea than getting into a car with a stranger. So I told him my address, and I trusted fate. At first, everything seemed to be going fine. We drove along the highway and listened to the rock hits of the 1980s. And I even started singing along. But all of a sudden, the driver stopped near an abandoned gas station.
Girl, please get out of the car.
Goosebumps ran down my back. What a fool I'd been. I had jumped into an open trap all by myself. And with a trembling hand, I opened the door, stumbled out of the car, and stared at my companion with pleading eyes. Please, sir,
Tell me what happened to you. How did you end up alone on the road so late at night?
Well, my brothers and I, we were having a picnic, and then a loud rustle interrupted my stuttering. The driver was taking something out of the trunk, and at that moment, I realized that I didn't have anything to lose. And so as soon as the stranger disappeared behind his car, I started running with all of my might back into the forest. I just ran, and I kept running and running and running. At least an hour must have passed before I walked out of the forest and found myself near an unfamiliar supermarket. I had finally gotten out. My throat felt so dry from fear and from running that it was hard to breathe. I found a few coins in my pocket, and I took a water bottle out of the refrigerator, and I went up to the cash register when I suddenly saw him in the queue, the very man I'd been running away from for so long already. My blood ran cold. The bottle I was holding slipped out of my weak grasp, and it shattered on the floor. A loud bang made the driver turn his head, and our eyes met. Sir, I didn't do anything. Please, just leave me alone. The huge man suddenly laughed, kindly, almost like a child, and said,
Girl, thank God you're all right. Where did you run off to?
Why did you stop the car? What were you gonna get out of the trunk?
My bag with my ID was in there. I'm a policeman. I wanted to show it to you so you wouldn't be afraid of me and you would tell me the actual truth of what happened. After all, you've got to admit, a child on the highway at such a late hour, it's very strange.
I exhaled loudly and laughed. Yeah, it's easy to imagine all sorts of things when you're in a dark forest at night. After the policeman showed me his ID, I immediately felt better. I had run in vain. The driver turned out to be a kind man. He drove me home, even though he was heading in the other direction. After thanking him for his help, I walked up to our door. I hadn't even lifted my hand to knock yet when the door swung open and my dad hugged me. It took us both a bit to calm down, but then I froze in horror. He looked so pale. Dad, I'm home. I'm fine. I'm just... But before I could finish, my younger brothers came and they hugged me too. All of them interrupting each other, they were shouting,
It was all Ethan! He said we were gonna get ice cream, and then Mom and Dad came back earlier and we told them everything. We were gonna go out looking for you. Claire, I'm so happy you've been found.
At that moment, I felt like the happiest girl in the world. My family My new family had been even more worried about me than I ever would have imagined. I kissed my younger brothers and my father, and I noticed that my mom wasn't here. That's when Dad explained everything.
When the boys told us what Ethan had done, your mother felt sick. The ambulance has taken her to the hospital. Claire, you are very dear to us.
Confused, I looked around the room and I suddenly saw him. Ethan was sitting in the corner and sobbing loudly, like a 1-year-old child would. I hated him with my whole heart, but at that moment, my brother just looked so pathetic. Ethan, I'll forgive you if you promise to never do something like that again.
Kids, listen. There's no point in hiding anything any longer. For many years, your mother and I have been unsuccessfully trying to have a child. We lost all hope and decided to adopt. Ethan, that's how you came into our family. We were raising you like our own son when it suddenly turned out that your mother was pregnant. We were so happy when Oscar was born, then Peter, and then a few years later, Dan. But we also wanted a daughter. However, the doctors had forbidden us from having any more kids. We were already desperate. A miracle happened.
I squeezed my eyes shut, overwhelmed, but my dad continued.
A letter came from the orphanage that we'd taken Ethan from. It turned out that he had a sister. Ethan, Claire, your parents died in a car accident 15 years ago, but Claire came to an orphanage much later, after the grandparents who had been raising her died. When we found out that Claire was Ethan's sister, we took her in as soon as we could, so you could grow up, knowing each other.
I stood there, afraid to look up. In just one evening, my life had turned completely around and I didn't know what to do next. But Ethan recovered faster than I did. He threw himself at my feet and whispered pleadingly,
I'm sorry, Claire. I'm gonna be the best brother ever. I'm such a moron.
All my anger instantly disappeared. I gently ran my hand through my brother's hair. My own brother. For the first time in 16 years, I had not only found my family in spirit, but also by blood. We spent at least an hour hugging in the living room, and next day, we went to the hospital to visit Mom. Luckily, she was recovering quickly. This story had taught me that everything should be in moderation. Being the only daughter in the family is cool, of course, but it doesn't make me a princess. After my mom was discharged from the hospital, I started to help her around the house and take care of my brothers, ironing and sewing up their clothes, cooking, and cleaning rooms.
Hi there, my name is Alex, and I need to tell you my story. Believe me, it is really important to me. The thing is, I live in 3 different people, in all 3 of them at the same time. How is this possible? Have patience, you'll find out soon enough. But first things first, I was never exceptionally smart or handsome. Look at my face. But life gave me a different kind, a bit of incredible luck. It seemed like someone invisible was always there to save me and gave me everything I desired. I was born into a wealthy family. My parents were successful businessmen, and since I was the only child, I got the best of everything. The most expensive toys and clothes, the best school, the most beautiful girls, but don't think that my rich parents were guardian angels. I was just lucky, even when it had nothing to do with them. For example, when I was 13, I convinced my classmates to sneak into our neighbor's backyard and paint some graffiti on his shed, and to skateboard in his empty pool. It was illegal, but I thought it would be fun. The party was in full swing when the cops called by an angry neighbor arrived. Everyone got caught. Everyone. Except me. My classmates were grounded for a month, while my parents bought me a new skateboard. You still aren't convinced? When I was 16, I took part in the mountain bike trials in my city. I was not the strongest participant, and I couldn't hope to win. However, a day before the trials, one of my competitors broke his arm, and the other one had his bike stolen. As you may have guessed, I won the competition. I got a girlfriend, thanks to luck as well. My friend Steve and I both liked Melanie. She was the prettiest girl in school, the prom queen. I wanted to date her, but she was into Steve. He played American football. He was also older than me. I never stood a chance, but they weren't together for long. Suddenly, Steve's parents got divorced, and he had to move with his father to another city. Of course, Melanie started to date me. When I was 19, my parents died. It was devastating. But on the other hand, I inherited all their money and now had complete freedom to do what I wanted with my life. Soon, I became fully convinced that my luck had no limits. I liked to try it and got everything I wanted each time. Racing on motorcycles against guys as reckless as me became my favorite hobby. I didn't even wear a helmet because I had complete faith in my luck. Many of my friends got injured. I never got a single scratch. I even earned a nickname, Lucky. Oh yes, those were the days. But one day, something happened. We were racing on sports bikes on empty highways, as usual. We were going pretty fast, and I, as usual, wasn't wearing a helmet. I liked the wind blowing through my hair. The feeling was so good. I even closed my eyes. It felt like the whole world was at my feet. Suddenly, the front wheel swerved, and I lost control of the bike. The last thing I saw was the road getting closer, and then everything went dark. I only remember bits and pieces of what happened next. The ambulance, the hospital, the doctors leaning over me. When I regained consciousness, I realized that I was lying on a hospital bed, covered in some tubes and hospital equipment. My head was fully bandaged. My girlfriend Melanie was sitting next to me and holding my hand. My first thought was that my luck had run out. Maybe I had done something wrong. But then the doctor came into the room and told me everything. It turned out that after the fall, I hit my head on the asphalt so hard that I cracked my skull and the skin on my face was almost completely torn off. The doctor said my chances of survival were slim to none, but by pure chance, an ambulance was passing by that very moment, and I was immediately taken to the hospital. It's very strange, but for some reason, that was the day that the best surgeon in the hospital was working late. He was the one who saved me. Lying on the bed, I smiled under the bandages because that was the moment I knew my luck was still with me. I was getting better very fast. All the doctors in the hospital were surprised by how easily I was recovering from such a terrible injury. But I was calm because I knew that it was all thanks to my incredible luck. I got out of the hospital a mere month later. The only thing that reminded me of the accident was a broken motorcycle and my new face. Yes, it looked different now. Savage with a significant scar on the side. After this accident, I got more respect, became even cooler. They started to call me Mr. Lucky, and Melanie and I always stole the spotlight at any party. Do you think that I stopped racing after that? Of course not. I bought a brand new motorcycle, even more powerful and fast. And we began to race just like we used to. But I started to wear a helmet, just in case. Once again, I was relying on my luck completely, until one day, another thing happened. During one of the races, I decided to run a red light and did not notice a car driving right at me. I barely avoided a collision, but that car veered off the road and hit a tree. The driver was an elderly man. He hit the windshield and lost consciousness. We immediately called an ambulance, and the old man was rushed to the hospital. The police officers were questioning me for a long time, but in the end, they let me go. The next day, I woke up thinking that I got lucky, as usual, and by some miracle escaped all my problems when suddenly the doorbell rang. It was the police. They came to arrest me. At the station, I was told that the old man driving the car had died that night. And now I was going to be tried for unintentional manslaughter. I was released on bail and told to wait for the trial. For the first time in my life, I got terrified. Had I run out of luck? I couldn't believe it. Besides, none of my friends came to support me. Only Melanie came to see me, sometimes, and tried to cheer me up. A month later, I was tired. I was already prepared for any outcome. But deep inside, I was still hoping I would get lucky. And luck was on my side again. The lawyer who defended me was able to prove that I hadn't seen the red light because I had recently undergone facial surgery and had vision problems. But something weird happened. The wife of the dead old man came up to me, looked me in the eyes, and said that she was withdrawing the charges. Then she added, "Soon you'll understand what you have to do." What did she mean by that? My luck saved me once again. I was released and got off with a fine. After that, I began to look at life differently. Should I stop tempting fate and always rely on luck? Yes, the luck was still on my side, but that no longer brought me any joy. That is what happened after my face changed. I started to feel that I was doing something wrong, and I couldn't get the woman's words out of my head. Soon you'll understand what you have to do. Long story short, I sold my bike and gave up racing. I didn't want to hang out with people who had betrayed me anyway. Only Melanie was still with me. However, she was always busy, and we saw each other less and less often. One day, we were sitting in a cafe and talking about this and that. I wanted to tell her about the thoughts that wouldn't leave me alone. Then I realized that my tongue was not working. I couldn't say anything. I got a terrible headache and started shivering. I saw Melanie shout for somebody to call a doctor. I slowly slid off the chair and fell to the floor. When I came to my senses, I found myself back in the hospital, lying on the same bed even. And Melanie was there again. What had happened? When the doctor came in, I looked at him and realized that things were bad. The doctor said that they'd examined my head and the results were not good. The thing is, after the accident, a tumor formed in my brain and was now pressing on the vessels. And every day, the tumor was getting bigger. But the worst part was that they couldn't remove it. This news simply destroyed me. Was this the end? Where was my luck that had saved me so many times? Maybe it couldn't last forever, and I had just used up all of it. All in all, I felt awful. Melanie left, and I stayed in the hospital. They prescribed me some treatment to relieve my condition. So I've been at the hospital for a month now. Every few days, the doctors prescribe me a new treatment and run some tests, but it only makes me feel worse. In all this time, I had several more episodes, and each time, the doctors brought me back to life. Melanie came by less and less often. The last time she was here last week and said we should break up. It turns out she has already been dating another man for several months. She didn't want to tell me and make me feel bad, but I'm not angry with her. It was just rotten luck she met me. And yesterday, my doctor came by. He was very sad and didn't know where to begin. He said they had done everything they could, but there was no helping me. I was dying. In the next few days, I would fall into a coma and wouldn't wake up again, and that he was very sorry. I couldn't sleep that night. I kept thinking and finally understood. After I got a different face, I became a different person. Now I know what killed me. It's not the tumor. It's the selfishness and the vanity which I justified by calling myself lucky. Many good people got hurt because of me. But I only ever thought about myself and was happy when others felt bad. In the early morning, I remembered the words of the woman whose husband had died because of me. Soon you'll understand what you have to do. And I did. If you are reading this now, it means I'm gone. My last wish was to become a donor and to donate my organs to the people who could really use some luck. I signed the documents and was told that my kidneys would be given to a woman with cancer. My liver would be transplanted to a man, and my thyroid gland to one young fellow. So it seems like I will continue to live on in 3 different people, in all 3 of them at the same time. I am very lucky that I have enough time left to do at least something good with my life. Look at my new face and remember me like this, because I have changed. Sometimes even a seemingly small event can flip the script. Getting lucky doesn't mean you should become reckless.
Hi, my name is Dorothy, and I want to tell you the story of my first love. But don't think it's going to be some typical tearful melodrama. No, what happened to me was more like a psychological thriller. I hadn't expected any of it to happen. Are you interested yet? If you are, subscribe to the channel and then listen to what happened to me. Not too long ago, my parents had moved to a small town in a southern state. It was a very ordinary town, and I had to go to a very ordinary school there. To be honest, I was a little worried about being part of a new class and whether or not I'd find any friends there. But on the first day I showed up, I realized that I'd been worried for nothing. The kids in my new school were very friendly. Moreover, I quickly made a friend called Ashley, and she gave me a tour of the classes and introduced me to her friends. It's little wonder that we were basically best friends by the end of the day. My first day of school was almost over and I was about to go home, when suddenly I saw a guy in the hallway. He caught my attention at once and I couldn't tear my eyes away from him. He was extremely handsome, and there was something about him that made my heart just beat faster. I wondered why I hadn't noticed him at school before that. Ashley saw me staring and said cheerfully,
Oh, have you fallen under his spell as well? That's Ronald, the coolest guy at our school.
I couldn't stop looking at that guy. He seemed like he was perfect. I thought about him all the way home. I was so lost in thought that I even missed my turn. I spent the whole evening waiting for the next day of school so I could see him again. As you might have guessed, I quickly fell in love with Ronald. I went to school every day just to see him during the breaks. And after a while, that just wasn't enough for me anymore. And I grew determined to get him as my boyfriend. When Ashley heard about my plans, she laughed merrily.
That's not gonna work. First of all, he's really cool and has his own clique. And secondly, he already's got a girlfriend. Her name is Melissa.
Ashley was right. This wasn't gonna be easy. But I still had to try because all I wanted was to be with Ronald. He always came to school on his motorcycle, so I waited for him in the school parking lot after classes. A few moments later, he came out and started heading for his motorcycle. I bumped into him like it had been an accident and dropped all my textbooks and notebooks on the ground. Oh, sorry, I didn't see you. I'd expected him to help me pick up my things, but Ronald just threw me a quick glance and got on his bike and drove away. What was that? I didn't think he'd react like that. Seems like it was time to step up my game. Ronald clearly valued his bike more than anything, and I was pretty sure I could use that. I spent a whole evening on the internet, reading everything I could find about motorcycles. I took some notes and made some drawings. By morning, I could easily carry on a conversation about bikes. The next day, I waited until school was over, and I looked for Ronald in the parking lot again. When he appeared, I pretended to be looking closely at his motorcycle. When he got closer, I said, kind of indifferently, "Nice bike, but the shock absorbers seem to be from a different model." Ronald looked surprised and began to tell me about how he'd built his own bike. I'd finally found his weak spot. We started talking about motorcycles, and he even smiled at me. I was so happy. We'd almost agreed to meet up again sometime when his girlfriend, Melissa, suddenly appeared next to him. She immediately got on the bike and said, "Ron, we're in a hurry. Let's go already." He smiled at me, got on the bike, and then drove away. I didn't even get a chance to say anything to him. I felt like I'd really fallen for him. His voice, his laughter, and the way he looked at me. I liked him, and there was nothing I could do about it. It seemed like he liked me back too, so I decided I would fight for my happiness. It was time for desperate measures. I started dropping love notes from a secret admirer into Melissa's locker. I also spread a rumor around the school that she was secretly dating somebody else. I didn't have to wait long. A few days later, Ronald made quite a scene. He shouted at Melissa, accusing her of cheating on him, but she only replied that she hadn't done anything of the sort. And that was my cue. While they were still arguing, I walked up to Melissa and handed her the note I'd just written. "Melissa, I think this is for you. Some guy just gave it to me near the school entrance," I said, innocently. Ronald snatched the note out of my hands and read it.
I knew it!
He shouted.
We're done. I'm breaking up with you. I don't want to see you again.
He turned around and he walked away. Wow, I finally did it! I caught up to him in the parking lot and I said I was so sorry for what had happened, trying to sound as sincere as possible. He needed someone to support him, and I was in the right place at the right time. He told me how much he hated betrayals. I said I totally got what he meant. We chatted for maybe a half an hour, and I suggested we meet outside of school sometime. And luckily, he agreed. It was easy after that. When we first met up, we simply went to a cafe. The second time, to the movies. And the third, he gave me a ride on his motorcycle. And after the fourth, Ronald had completely forgotten all about Melissa and was cheerfully telling me about tinkering with his bike in the garage. Long story short, very soon he became my boyfriend. I got what I wanted, and I was over the moon. Naturally, everyone at school noticed immediately. Ashley started asking me, surprised, how I'd done it. I was so proud of myself that I told her everything. I thought Ashley would be impressed, but she suddenly stopped smiling and said thoughtfully, "Dorothy, but that's so dishonest." I told my friend that everyone had to fight for their happiness, even if that meant I wasn't going to play fair. Was that so wrong? You think Ronald's ex-girlfriend backed off after that? If only. Melissa kept trying to get him back. One day, she came up to us in the school parking lot and tried to convince him to come back to her. She said she hadn't cheated on him, and it had been someone's stupid joke on her. But I was prepared for that. I long ago realized that Melissa was beautiful, but kinda dumb. So, I had no trouble convincing Ronald that she was lying and couldn't be trusted. Of course, he listened to me, and we drove off together, leaving her alone in the parking lot. A few weeks later, I found out that Melissa wasn't coming to school anymore because she'd transferred to another one without saying anything. I felt like this was a huge victory. Ronald and I spent a lot of time together. At first, I was completely captivated by him. Then, I got used to him and just enjoyed being the girlfriend of the coolest guy in school. But something changed. After a while, he started to annoy me. The thing was, he didn't talk about anything other than his motorcycle. He wasn't interested in anything else. He didn't watch or read anything. And after a while, he told me, absolutely seriously, that he thought the earth was flat. That's when I realized I'd made a horrible mistake. Ronald was a complete idiot. Why hadn't I seen that straight away? Melissa and he were perfect for each other, but it was too late. He was head over heels in love with me. Only then did I realize what kind of situation I was in. I started to hide from Ronald because I couldn't bear to listen to any more of his stupid nonsense. But the more I ignored him, the more he bothered me. He would wait for me next to the classroom to spend our breaks together, or he'd wait for me in the parking lot after classes. He even started waiting for me outside my house in the mornings. It just got so unbearable, but I couldn't tell him that I didn't want to see him again. I was hiding from Ronald in the school restroom one day when my friend Ashley found me. She asked what I was doing, and I had to tell her that I'd made a mistake and was now suffering from the attention of that idiot. I needed someone to support me, and I asked her for help. But Ashley got angry and menacingly said, "You've ruined his relationship with Melissa, and now you want to break up with him? That is so low! I would never have expected that from you." She left, and I stayed hidden. What was I supposed to do now? I was already losing friends because of Ronald. I just couldn't stay with him. He was annoying me way too much. I just couldn't bring myself to tell it to him straight. And then, I came up with a brilliant plan. I secretly started dating Nathan, a guy from another class who liked me. It wasn't too hard to achieve. I smiled at him a couple times and I let him ask me out. Within a few days, Nathan was sure that I was his girlfriend. But that wasn't what I needed. I was just waiting for Ronald to find out. Rumors spread very quickly at school. And one day, of course, they reached my boyfriend. He threw a fit in the hallway and accused me of cheating on him. I heard a lot of unpleasant things about myself from him then. But that was what I wanted, right? Oh, I see how it is. Then we're done.
I don't want to see you again, I said, my voice full of hurt. Ronald gave me a look full of hatred and he left. At that moment, I even felt a little scared. Was I overdoing it? But, hey, the job was done. That same night, I dumped Nathan as well, saying that he'd fulfilled his role and I no longer needed him. I was finally free. No one would bother me with their stupid love anymore. After the weekend, I went to school in a good mood. But I noticed something strange. No one was looking at me. And when I came into the classroom, none of my classmates greeted me. They didn't even seem to notice me sit down. What was going on? I wanted to talk to Ashley, but when I approached her, she turned away from me. Now that was too far. I grabbed her and demanded to know why everyone was acting like this. Haven't you noticed? No one wants to talk to you anymore, she said. You've been so awful, and everyone in the school knows about it. It turned out that right after our fight, Ronald hadn't showed up at school or answered his phone. No one knew where he was or if he was okay. That scared me. Only then did I realize that I'd done something very wrong. But is it really my fault that I fell out of love with the guy after getting to know him better?
Hi, I'm Angela. Some time ago, my boyfriend Luke and I went to a summer camp. I liked it there, and I even made a friend. Stacy, Luke, and I hung out all the time, and everything was fine. Until one day when something terrible happened. During a bonfire party, I suddenly saw Luke and Stacy together. They weren't just chatting or cuddling in a friendly way, but kissing. Can you imagine? My boyfriend was kissing another girl. Of course, I immediately took him aside, threw a fit, and demanded an explanation. His answer shocked me. I'm sorry, but we need to break up. I finally met the girl of my dreams, and that's Stacy. What? Stacy was the girl of his dreams? What was I, chopped liver? I burst into tears, and I begged Luke not to dump me. He was so important to me, and I didn't want to lose him. But Luke remained adamant. He had already turned around to leave when, to my own surprise, I blurted out, I'm pregnant. Luke turned around and looked at me in shock. Of course, because of that news, he changed his mind about breaking up with me. For the rest of our time at camp, Luke took care of me and constantly asked me how I was feeling. Wow, I really hadn't expected that little lie to work so well. When the holidays came to an end, we went back to college. At first, everything was going fine. But soon, Luke began to suspect something. One day, he came up to me and told me all his doubts. You're going to gym classes just like usual. You have no baby bump, and I've never even seen you throw up. Did you lie to me? I got scared, but I pretended to be offended. Pregnancy is different for everyone. As for gym class, you know our coach. If I skipped even one class, he would immediately fail me. Luke looked at me uncertainly. He didn't seem to know whether to believe me or not. So I decided to go further. I clutched my stomach, doubled over, and groaned. Luke immediately helped me sit down. What is it? Are you feeling sick? Should I call an ambulance? I exhaled slowly and assured him that it had already passed. I could probably become an actress because after that, Luke finally believed me. A few days later, I started putting a soft toy under my clothes, but I soon realized that it was inconvenient and didn't look very good. So I ordered a fake belly on the internet. Everyone started to go easy on me in college. Even the coach just let me sit on the bench during classes. I was liking the life of a pregnant woman more and more by the minute. One day, when I got home, I went up to my room. When I grabbed the railing, my fingers got stuck. The railing had been smeared with something sticky. And I immediately realized that my insufferable brother was pulling another prank. Ollie, get over here right now. When my brother saw me, he burst out laughing. We started to argue, and our parents heard us shouting. I ratted Ollie out, and they made him clean up and wash the dishes every day as punishment. Speaking of our parents, more than anything, I was afraid of rumors about my pregnancy reaching them. I would be finished. I tried to be careful, but eventually I got busted. That morning, I waited until my parents had left for work like usual. Then I quickly got ready for college and began to put on my false belly. All of a sudden, Ollie came into my room. That brat was skipping school. When he saw me, he froze with his mouth wide open. And you know what sucked the most? My brother had always been quick-witted, and he immediately figured out what was going on. Well. Pretending to be pregnant? Lying to your boyfriend? I gritted my teeth with anger. I could not afford to fight with him. It's a secret. Please, don't tell anyone. Ollie grinned slyly. Okay, I won't, but you'll have to do whatever I want. I really had no choice, so I agreed. That evening, my brother demanded that I clean up and wash the dishes for him. After coming back from college, I had to forget about how tired I was and do all the housework for him. Our parents noticed, but didn't mind. They were just happy that we had finally stopped fighting. Ollie was constantly asking me to buy things for him, and I spent almost all of my money on him. My brother was infuriating, but I had to bite my tongue and bear it. One day, Luke said he had signed me up for a pregnancy course and suggested that we attend it together. I was afraid that I might get busted there, but I had to go so I wouldn't arouse suspicion. On the way, Luke told me he had started looking for a job. He was going to drop out of college. I have to earn money to protect you and our child. Maybe you should wait. No, I'm ready to take responsibility for our family. That really bothered me. I had never thought he would take this so seriously. However, when we came to the course, Ollie suddenly called me and demanded that I come home immediately. I told that brat I was busy, but he reminded me of our little agreement. I had to tell Luke that my brother wasn't feeling well and I had to go home. Of course, Luke wanted to come with me, but I convinced him to stay. When I got home, I found out that our parents had left for a few days, and Ollie had thrown a party, invited a bunch of friends, and made a mess. Damn, I had just cleaned up. Ollie suddenly turned the music down and handed me a maid costume with a chuckle. Dear sister, tonight you get to be our maid. Change your clothes and get to work. I wanted to kill him. What nerve! I protested. But Ollie came closer and whispered in my ear, maybe I should tell Luke your little secret. There was nothing I could do, so I agreed. I spent the evening serving Ollie and his friends drinks, warming their food, cleaning up, and listening to their stupid jokes. The party was in full swing when I accidentally saw Luke through the window, and a few seconds later, the doorbell rang. Oh, damn it, what was he doing there? I asked my brother to get the door and I rushed upstairs, changed my clothes and put back on the fake belly. Then I went back to the living room and found Luke there. It turned out he'd brought me the materials from the course. I didn't want you to push yourself too far sitting at a computer, so I printed out the electronic manual. I thanked him and I tried to get him to leave, but Ollie intervened and started to get on my nerves. He started giving Luke hints that my stomach wasn't real. Luckily, Luke didn't figure it out. I told him I was exhausted, and I finally pushed him out the door. Then, I ripped my brother a new one and kicked his friends out. Ollie got angry and said he'd rat me out, but I said he should keep his mouth shut if he knew it was good for him. The next day, everyone in college began to rehearse a play. They were staged quite often in our college, but I never participated. Everything was going just as usual, and nothing foreshadowed trouble. Luke stayed late after classes, and I went home alone. I was walking down the street when I suddenly noticed a familiar car coming toward me. Those were my parents. But Ollie said they wouldn't be back until that night. Had he lied to me? I didn't have time to hide or take off my stomach. They got out of the car and I saw a nastily grinning Ollie behind them. Honey, we got back early and decided to pick you up. And noticing my stomach, she broke off and clutched at her heart. Dad looked at me, horrified. What is this? I had to very quickly come up with an explanation. I got a role as a pregnant woman in a play. I was at rehearsal and didn't have time to change yet. My parents breathed a sigh of relief. They praised me and said they would look forward to the premiere. I was afraid that Ollie would give me away, but he didn't say anything. He was probably just deciding to blackmail me more. Luke and I went to the pregnancy course almost every day. They told me how to breathe properly during childbirth, how to swaddle babies, and so on. It made me so nervous. What was I supposed to do when it was time to, give birth? One day, Luke asked me over to meet his parents. To say that I was nervous would be like saying nothing. I was imagining every possible bad scenario. And you know what? I was very right to worry. During the dinner, Luke's mom suddenly asked to talk to me in private. Are you not ashamed of yourself, ruining our son's life? He's dropping out of college and starting work because of you. And what about the baby? You're still children yourselves. How could you be parents? I was confused and I didn't know what to say. If only she knew that Luke was dropping out of college for nothing. There was no child. Luke suddenly came up to us. He had heard our conversation and decided to step in. Mom, don't you dare talk to Angela like that. She's family now and you and Dad will have to accept it. He took my hand and led me away. His dad tried to stop him, but Luke wouldn't listen. I wanted to sink through the floor. Luke's mom was right. First, he had dropped out of college. Now he was arguing with his parents, and it was all because of my lies. When I got home, I paced the room nervously. Things had gone way past too far, and I had no idea what to do. Over the weekend, Ollie demanded I take him to an amusement park. While my brother was on a roller coaster, I was waiting for him on the ground. Someone suddenly called me by the name. Angela! Damn it, it was Luke. I was terrified. Of course, I hadn't worn the fake belly for a walk with my brother. Luke's voice had come from behind me, so he hadn't seen my stomach yet. Without turning around, I ran forward and got lost in the crowd. He was shouting something after me, but I pretended not to hear. After locking myself in the women's bathroom, I texted my brother to go home without me. After waiting for about a half an hour, I cautiously looked around outside. After making sure that Luke was nowhere to be seen, I went home too. I was sitting in my room when someone suddenly slammed the front door. I then heard voices. Ollie had come back, but he wasn't alone. Luke was with him. One day, I would kill my little brother. Putting on my belly, I went downstairs. It turned out that Ollie had told Luke that I had suddenly felt sick, and so that was why I'd gone home. I had to play along. Yeah, I didn't feel that well, but I'm fine now. Luke wanted to take me to the doctor at once, and I just barely talked him out of it. Then he said he'd wait for my parents and officially meet them. Unable to stand it, I freaked out and asked him to leave. At first, Luke looked hurt, but then he smiled. Mood swings are normal in your condition. I understand. In fact, he was so understanding that it made me sick. I pushed Luke out the door, snapped at Ollie, and locked myself in my room. I was just so tired of all of this. I suddenly realized that I didn't like Luke as much as I'd used to. His suffocating care annoyed me, but he had sacrificed so much for me that I didn't know how to tell him the truth about everything. Falling face down on the bed, I burst into tears and spent almost the entire night crying. Just a couple of days after that, there was the first premiere of the play from our college. Luke had convinced me to go. We came to the hall just before the start and found empty seats. All of a sudden, my parents sat down next to us. What were they doing there? Damn it. I had lied to them about getting a role and I completely forgot. Angela, why are you still here and not backstage? Right, I was just about to go there. I grabbed Luke by the arm and dragged him away. Backstage, the play's director immediately approached us and said that only participants were allowed there. He wanted to kick us out, but I was quicker. Guess what I did? I ran out onto the stage with real actors. I had to improvise and find a way to join the performance. And by the way, props to the actors who played along with everything, acting like it was normal. After that, I quietly left the stage and the director immediately began to scold me. Ignoring him, I found Luke and dragged him away from the hall. However, my parents suddenly caught up to us by the door. My role in the play was really small, so we can go home. My parents didn't suspect anything and just praised me for my acting skills. I had only just relaxed when Luke ruined everything. Mr. and Mrs. Taylor, I've been wanting to meet you for a long time. I promise I'll take good care of Angela and our future child. My parents froze with stony faces. They looked at us, confused. Then Mom asked in a trembling voice, "Your child? Angela, are you pregnant after all?" At that moment, I wanted to disappear. Everyone expected some sort of explanation from me, but I had told so many lies that I couldn't find a way to come up with another one. Lifting up my t-shirt, I took off my fake belly and, with tears in my eyes, told them everything from the very beginning. The more I talked, the paler Luke got. He was absolutely shocked, and I didn't know how to look him in the eye. I felt terribly ashamed of myself, and I ran away. When I got home, I locked myself in my room again. Eventually, I calmed down, and I felt relieved that my lies had finally been exposed. I would not have to deceive anyone anymore. But I still felt guilty, and I tried to think of ways to make it up to Luke. I was looking through my phone one day when I found Stacy's number. Oh, you know, the girl from camp that Luke had fallen in love with. I texted her and asked if she still liked Luke. When Stacy said yes, I said that he was free now, and I told her to call him. Soon, I heard rumors about Stacy and Luke dating, and I felt a little less guilty. Things got better, and even Ollie had stopped bothering me. But one day, something happened that turned my world upside down again. On that day, after a lecture, Luke suddenly came up to me and asked me to talk. He'd brought me to a square where musicians were performing my favorite song. I tensed up. What was happening? I've had a lot of time to think on everything. I appreciate that you went to such lengths to keep me. Of course, it was a terrible thing to do, but I'm ready to forgive you. Luke suddenly got down on one knee and showed me a ring. I want us to be a real family and have a baby. This is my real dream, Angela. Will you marry me? I was so shocked that I didn't know how to react. I couldn't believe that this was happening. I asked him for some time to think about it. I still can't decide what to do.
Hey guys, my name is Rue and I'm 15. Do you like my tale? Of course, I'm not a real mermaid. But let me start at the beginning. By the way, I'm a little nervous. I've been watching Private Diary for a while, and now I'm getting the chance to tell my story. Press like and subscribe. When I was very young, I had a spine disorder, and a doctor told me to wear a heavy and uncomfortable corset. It was terrible. I looked like a small Terminator in a pink dress. Luckily, my parents found another solution and signed me up for swimming lessons at a public pool. I really enjoyed them. Do you remember the fairy tale about the Little Mermaid? When I was a kid, I saved a beautiful stranger just like Ariel. Can you imagine? I got a fish as a result. I was enjoying my practice when I suddenly saw splashes of water at the other end of the pool. Someone was waving their arms around and clearly needed help. There was no instructor or adults nearby, so I swam up to that guy and helped him get out of the water. A bunch of people immediately surrounded us. They wrapped a towel around the kid and brought him to a medical center. He was wearing a swimming cap, so I didn't get a good look at his face. I only remembered his bracelet had 2 fish on it. When I walked into the locker room, I saw one of the fish on a bench next to a note. Dear Water Fairy, I didn't have time to thank you for saving me. Take this fish as a gift. I will be waiting for you in the cafe opposite the pool today at 3:30 p.m. Wow! I quickly changed my clothes and ran to the cafe. I waited for him for several hours, but the boy never showed up. Several years passed since that day. I wondered if he remembered me and if he still wore that bracelet. It was the first day of the holidays. I could finally sleep as long as I wanted to. However, I had a friend that quickly got bored and dragged me along on adventures. Her name was Kathleen. Rue, I texted you 1,000,000 times. Why didn't you answer? I'm sleeping, Kat. Sleep is for the weak. Take off your Peppa Pig pajamas and meet me at our spot as soon as possible. Okie dokie. How did she know about my pajamas? By our spot, Kathleen meant an outdoor cafe not far from the pool. I have 2 news. One of them is good, and the other is amazing. My friend told me there was going to be a party to mark the beginning of the holidays in the park that night, and she had got us tickets. Wow! Besides that, an audition for those who wanted to star in a new Billie Eilish music video was going to take place in our city. Wow! Kathleen was a beauty, so she was determined to win. Will you cheer me on? Of course, I just need to go to practice first. When we came to the pool, my blood ran cold. It was closed. Hey, what was going on? I saw some construction workers nearby. One of them said that the pool building was in disrepair, and the city authorities had decided to demolish it. No! Tell me this is a joke. Rue, it's true. Look, even the news websites wrote about it. I felt like a fish on dry land. Damn it, I had so many fond memories of that place. Don't be a sad shrimp. I need your support. While my friend and the rest of the contestants were auditioning for the role, I was hanging around the studio hallway, bored. Then, a guy with a bucket ran out from around the corner and accidentally spilled water all over me. It really wasn't my day. The next second, a woman appeared next to me. She looked admiringly at my wet hair and said that I was exactly what they were looking for. It turned out she was the director of the movie video. She convinced me to take part in the audition. The craziest thing was that I made it to the second qualifying round along with Kathleen and several other girls. Wow, things were looking up. I was over the moon because I got a chance to meet my idol. However, Kathleen started acting weird after the audition. After all, we were now rivals. You went behind my back. I didn't expect it from you, Rue. I don't know what made them notice me. Can't you be happy for me? Yeah. Hooray. Yeah, unsurprisingly, she hardly talked to me at the party and hung out with other guys in the evening. I felt wronged, and was about to go home when I suddenly saw a guy sitting on the lawn away from everyone else. He was wearing a cap and hiding his face behind a mask. How curious. Mr. Incognito piqued my interest. I imagined flirting with him. Hey, did you just get out of the oven? Because you're really hot. I'm Rue. But in reality, I only managed to blush and blurt out, "Hello, I'm Rue. It's hot in the oven, but you got out." What? Let me start over. Hi, I'm Rue. What's your name? The guy pulled the cap over his eyes and said it didn't matter because he had to hide his name and face. Girls shouldn't walk alone so late. Let me walk you home. Wow, he gave off such a mysterious vibe. I agreed and we slowly walked to my house. When we were passing by the pool, I sighed sadly and told him how upset I was that it was going to be demolished. Don't you know? About what? He said that someone had hacked the mayor's account and made a post about the pool building being in good condition. It turned out the construction company had paid the mayor so that he'd let them demolish it. A scandal broke out and the pool was saved. That's incredible! Are you serious? I went online and made sure he was telling me the truth. That was amazing news! How can I thank that mysterious hacker? The pool is very dear to me. Well, don't worry about it. Besides, I like to swim here myself. He winked mysteriously and adjusted his cap. At that moment, I saw a bracelet with a fish pendant on his wrist. My mouth went dry. Was it really him? The boy I'd saved all those years ago? I wanted to ask him about it, but to my surprise, he spoke first. Rue, you are a nice girl. I think I can trust you. He finally told me his name, Fred, and confessed that he was the hacker trying to do good. No one can know who I really am. Do you promise to keep my secret? I nodded, mesmerized. Before I knew it, we reached my house. Fred kissed my hand goodbye and invited me to the cinema the next day. Then, he immediately left. Can you hear it? That's my heart pounding. Fate brought us back together. I'd never forgotten Fred. I decided to ask him if he'd remember that incident in the pool on our next date. Mom, Dad, I'm home, and I'm going to bed. I kept thinking about that incredible meeting that whole night. I was curious and decided to find out more about Fred's hacking achievements. There were many articles on the internet about the noble hacker. He had exposed many unscrupulous people. For example, before the pool incident, he'd published proof that a local factory was polluting a pond. No one knew the hacker's identity except me. Wow! Feeling excited, I fell asleep. I was watching TV during breakfast and saw an interview with the mayor. He was apologizing for his part in the scandal, and his son was standing next to him. I had to admit, he was a handsome guy. Unfortunately, he was probably as dishonest as his father. After all, like father, well, you get it. After watching the interview, I immediately went to the second round of the audition. Of course, I ran into Kathleen there. She was frowning at me from afar for a long time before coming up to me. Where did you go after the party yesterday? I was worried. Yeah, so worried you never even called me. My friend sighed guiltily and suddenly hugged me. I'm sorry, I was so nasty. Let's be friends again. Of course. We hugged and I told her about meeting an incredibly cool guy the day before. Nice. However, our truce did not last long. 2 people advanced to the final qualifying round, me and Kathleen. Passions were running high, and my friend started to glare at me again. I didn't know Kat was so petty. Whatever. Despite all that, I was in a great mood. I went for a swim in the pool and ran into some guy at the door. He bumped into me and didn't even apologize. What an arrogant jerk. I took a closer look and recognized him. It was the mayor's son, Eugene. Now I knew why he was acting so haughty. He suddenly grabbed me by the wrist and stared at my bracelet in surprise without saying a word. What a psycho! Do you think you can do anything you want just because you're the mayor's son? He didn't say anything, and I walked on with my head held high. That evening, I waited for Fred by the cinema. Where is he? We're going to be late. He finally appeared, out of breath and agitated. He hid behind a corner and anxiously looked around it. Is someone following you? Yeah, I was looking for information to expose someone else and angered some dangerous people. He made sure that some girl on the street had passed by us, dragged me towards the cinema, and we finally went in. To my surprise, he didn't even take off his cap and mask on our date. Did he wear them to bed too? I tried to talk to him about what happened in the pool many years ago, but Fred seemed annoyed. I paid for the tickets, so let's watch the movie. Well, okay. As we were leaving, I suddenly saw a familiar silhouette in the crowd. Kathleen! She saw us too and looked at us disapprovingly. Fred suddenly said he had to go. I'll call you, Grace. I'm Rue. Yeah, right. Well, I'll see you later. He was acting kinda suspicious, right? But I decided that Fred had probably seen whoever had been following him again and run away because of that. After all, there was a reason he was hiding his face. Is that your mysterious prince? The one and only. Then I have bad news for you. He's a terrible crook and a heartbreaker. You should break up with him. Oh, so now you're suddenly worried about me? How many masks do you wear, Kat? I don't understand what the real you is like. I mean it. I didn't listen to her and went home. It was obvious that my friend was just trying to upset me because she was mad about the audition. Not this time, darling. I called Fred the next day and invited him for a walk. I couldn't wait to have a heart-to-heart with him. I had so many questions. However, sorry, sweetheart, but I'm going to keep gathering info today. Wow! Who will you expose this time? Just read the news as usual, and you'll find out soon enough. Well, see you later. Ciao! I didn't like feeling unimportant, but it was admirable that Fred helped people. I had no other plans, so I went shopping with my parents. It took a lot of time. By the evening, we were tired and hungry, so we went to a small restaurant near our house. I could eat a burger the size of Texas right now. We were about to order when we heard a crash in the kitchen. The mayor's son, Eugene, ran out, followed by the restaurant owner with a frying pan at the ready. You menace! Catch him! The security guards pounced on Eugene. Our eyes met for a moment, and then he ran out into the street. What was he doing here? The owner got so nervous that he closed the restaurant, and we went home hungry. My poor stomach! Can you hear it rumbling too? I decided to read the news articles about my knight in shining armor before going to bed. I wondered if Fred had managed to publish his new material yet. I found a recent article. It said that the noble hacker had exposed an unscrupulous restaurant owner. It turned out his kitchen was teeming with cockroaches. Ew! That was the restaurant we had just been in! That got me thinking. Hold on. Fred hadn't been there. Unlike Eugene. Something wasn't adding up. I didn't know what was harder to believe. That Fred was lying to me, or that Eugene was the noble hacker. I was going to the audition the next morning when I saw Fred on the other side of the street. Well. Where was Mr. Incognito going? It was time to get to the bottom of it, so I started following him. I turned out to be an excellent spy. Fred didn't notice me, and I finally found out the truth. Unfortunately, it didn't make me happy. After all, Fred was hugging a girl. I got closer and overheard their conversation. Rue, you should know. I'm not Rue, I'm Grace. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm not feeling very well. You know I have a life full of dangers. Then, that jerk told her the same lie about being a noble hacker he used to fool me. Ugh, I realized what kind of person he was. He used the fact that no one knew the identity of the noble hacker to fool gullible girls. He went through girls so fast he couldn't even remember their names. He had probably been running away from one of his poor girlfriends back then at the cinema. Is it okay if I take part in your play called The Lying Scoundrel too? I told the girl the truth about Fred. She angrily tore off his mask and cap. You're such a moron! Fred looked quite plain without the mystery surrounding him. You'll regret this. Yeah, sure. Was that really the guy I had been in love with all those years? I even thought about throwing the fish away, but I'd grown too attached to it. I almost forgot about the final round of auditions while playing spy. I ran as fast as I could, but I was late anyway. Kathleen got the role since I hadn't shown up. But I decided I would be better than her and sincerely congratulated her on her victory. You'll look great on the screen. And I'm sorry I didn't listen to you back then. Fred turned out to be a jerk. He was hitting on me too. That's why I tried to warn you. No wonder you didn't believe me. I was so toxic. We made up again, this time for real. After that, my friend told me that the director had been waiting for me until the last possible moment. I want to give the role to you. You were born for it. Especially since I found out that I would have to swim. And I can't stand water. I was over the moon. I was very grateful to Kathleen. She was awesome after all. but you have to promise you'll introduce me to Billie Eilish. I started to prepare for the role and often swam in the pool. I also thought a lot about Eugene for some reason. He was still a mystery to me. One day, we met again. He wrote on the tablet, "Hello, Sweetwater Fairy. Do you remember me?" I was stunned. Had it been him? It turned out that Eugene was mute. That's why he came off as arrogant when I first met him. Back then, he'd recognized my bracelet, but couldn't tell me anything. He'd lost his fish in the locker room recently. Apparently, that's where Fred had found it. Eugene explained why he hadn't met me in the cafe when we were kids. His father had always considered his son a burden, and that day abruptly sent him away to a boarding school. Eugene had only recently come back and immediately begun to expose people like the mayor. I was so happy to meet him again after all these years. We could finally be together. I guess you've already figured out why I'm dressed like this. Yeah, we're filming the music video. My best friend and boyfriend are cheering me on.